Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Zach Congonis. We are here to bring you the best solutions to your lifting problems. Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way. We were just on
back
hockey.
for another episode. What?
We were just on hockey, weren't we? Yeah, I thought that was the point.
Absolutely. Tell us what you've been up to, because you've surprised the shit out of me with that.
Yeah, so pretty much took a week off training because me and Brendan played too much hockey in one given week, and my body was destroyed. Bear in mind, I've never played hockey before.
Like, looking at your training, anyway, like your that is essentially training. Like, really, like, because it's so varied already. You chuck that in, and it's like, well, let's just say you could. You're just more of a hybrid athlete now.
Well, see, the problem was it was meant to be a hybrid. It was meant to be a lower body day, but we were doing it to warm up, and one of his mates brought his kid, and this fucking little 5-year-old was legitimately doing better than us.
Just
so we had to
loving it too much. Oh yeah, of course, you have to smash him. Of course, yeah.
Honestly, this fucking kid was just. ATP, creatine phosphate does not exist. Just runs off straight sunlight. Just kept running around in circles. Then he kept swinging at our ankles and shins and shit. So we were like,
never met children.
Well, then I kept telling him things, and his dad was like, "Mate, kids take things very literally." Like, "Oh yeah, you to stop Brandon from taking the ball from you, just hit him in the shins." Next minute, this kid's fucking Happy Gilmoreing with a hockey stick, just absolutely trying to take him out.
Yeah. You have to be a bit careful with that. But I just can't believe you've. I just can't believe this is just another pivot into your training. It's just unbelievable. Like, you're the ultimate. Like, can we even call it hybrid athlete at this point? Because you're not really good at any of them. It's just doing just random shit.
We're just having a laugh. We're just legitimately having a laugh. Now, this week's gone back to more structure because we realised we can't just trade lower body sessions for hockey sessions. It's not how that works.
No.
You can't
not in a progressional sense anyway.
Yeah, no, you can't just play more hockey.
Yeah, specificity does exist, as we're going to cover a little bit in this episode.
Yeah,
so other stuff I've got, I'm on like a kind of a deload a little bit, but it's the first week of like my singles for my peak in the Pro Raw. So 4.5 weeks out or so now, so getting into the serious end. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hitting some singles this week. Hit the single squat yesterday, singles bench, singles deadlifts coming. Hopefully hit hopefully hit like somewhere in like 190 to 195 kind of range for a single on bench this week. I'm guessing. Haven't even looked at the program yet, but I'm guessing. And then it's suppy anyway. And then
it's fake program. Just do what you feel like.
Lazy program, as we've covered. No. And then the deadlifts, hopefully, I reckon around the 360, 365 area. Nice kind of single for now, and then hopefully add 5-10 a week into it, I reckon.
What did you squat last night?
325. It wasn't my best squat session. It was a little bit. There's a few different factors. It was like the hottest day ever in the gym. Like, it was fucking disgusting, which I've dealt with in the past fine, but I felt like I was way more adapted to it and used to it back then, whereas yesterday was a bit more out of the blue, so it kind of affected me a bit more. My blood sugars were a little bit lower than what is ideal, so this is the first prep that I've done like as a diabetic, so it's like lots of things affect it. You know, your blood sugars isn't just like eat carbs, take insulin. Like, there's so many other, like, your stress and just fucking everything impacts it. So it's a little bit harder to control. So I'm just kind of winging it, I guess, because like it's not like there's research on fucking elite powerlifting diabetics, you know. So
there will be now.
Well, not really. I don't. I still don't really know. I'm still just winging it.
Isn't there only 7 of them?
There's not many. You've got obviously Jess Bittner, who's I forget which weight class she's in, but she's like top of the castle as far as like female powerlifters in the world. So she's like probably the most famous one, and there are a bunch. Jordan Hellier from Zero over in Wales. When he came over and did Pro Raw last year, we had a good chat. In Australia, we have Alana. She's obviously like right up there as far as the best female powerlifters in Australia are upcoming, and no doubt, her upward trajectory is going to continue. So she's type 1 diabetic as well. So I mean, yeah, that's just in my small circle. So I'm sure there's a bunch more coming.
Should make shirts.
Yeah. I don't. This is the thing. Like, it's not even just a shirt thing or whatever, but like even just putting it in like your bio or whatever. It's not that I don't want to put it in because it's like a shame thing or whatever. But it's like I don't want to be identified as like, oh, you're that diabetic powerlifter guy. It's like, no, I'm just a powerlifter guy.
I'm just a powerlifter who can't regulate insulin well.
Well, it's not that I can't regulate.
Don't produce insulin.
Type 1 is it don't produce yet.
Wrong one.
But it's like you've been powerlifting and made it for how many years, and it's like, oh yeah, Will, that's the diabetic guy. It's like,
the diabetic guy.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, just shifting what I I don't really want to do that. I'm happy to give anybody my fucking opinion on it. Not that it's just purely anecdotal, but that's about as far as it goes. Maybe in the future I'll put it out there a bit more and try and help more, because like it has been good with the like seeing kids. Like I've had parents approach me and go like, oh yeah, like my kid's diabetic, and they like look up to you and stuff, and I'm like, oh okay, well that's good.
That's good. It's like, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be like the man with no neck.
Yes,
kids are walking into school like this.
You
like,
aspire to greatness. Yeah. Also, last episode with Alex as our co-host in the background.
That's a shame.
Is it co-host? We're the co-host. What's the third person?
He's Button Gimp.
Okay.
The director.
Yeah.
I'll
okay. Director. Yeah.
It's not a CD porno, Alex.
Have you seen The Room?
That's a fair point. It's a fair call.
So Alex is it's the last episode in before Mickey comes back and puts a stop to the chaos that is. Last week was especially chaotic. Hopefully this week is a touch more. I feel like this week's going to be a touch more structured.
I mean, I haven't screamed into the microphone yet. We still have time though. Still early days.
Yeah. The start was. We're in the right direction. We're headed off, but as we know with this podcast, absolutely nothing is predictable. We just go in. If we had a compass, there wouldn't be any mark. It's just going random directions.
What I like to think of it as is the scene from Dodgeball where the old dude starts throwing wrenches at them. That's this podcast. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. What was his name?
Applicable.
Something Queef McCann. Nah, they made a Queef joke. It's all right. Continue.
Yeah. This is the part where I'll chime in as director and say, moving on.
Continue. Yeah. So today's episode is a little bit on, it's about hypertrophy in general. We've covered hypertrophy. I think in a lot of episodes we talk about hypertrophy and its just application in powerlifting and powerlifting performance and how we use it as powerlifters to become better powerlifters, or how we should or shouldn't use it. And we're going to go a little bit more into the application and into the weeds of a line that we've said before is a bigger muscle has the potential to be a stronger muscle. I feel like it's a fairly common phrase in strength circles, and one that I definitely hold true. But there is nuance to it. It's quite a broad statement, right? And we'll go into that because there are some obvious questions that pop up. Like if you knew nothing about it and like you take away your bias there, like are you saying that if I just did German volume training on leg extensions and just did 10 sets of 10 every week and got jacked quads from that, which is entirely possible. Quad extensions are leg extensions, great exercise for your quads, very directed. So you could absolutely get gigantic quads from that. But is that necessarily going to carry over and make you a better squatter? Short term, long term, joints, ligaments, lots of so many kind of questions even off that. But as you can see, like it's not just a very simple bigger equals stronger type thing that we're talking about. So another way is I'm sure this scenario is out there for a lot of people, but like I'm sure there are a lot of jacked guys out there that have a lot of mass on their frame, muscle mass on their frame, and then you think you're doing pretty fucking well, and then you look over and you see some 60 kilo chick deadlifting your max for reps. If you've ever been in that situation, this is a good one for you as well. So again, ask the question in my head, like fuck, I've got way more mass than her, muscle mass, contractile tissue than her. Why the fuck aren't I stronger? So yeah, there's so many questions to that statement that a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. It's not a 1-for-1. So, yeah, where do you want to go from that, Zach?
I mean...
Sorry, my arm is getting yanked by this dog.
We were talking about stress before. We could probably highlight one that's in the room currently for Wilbo. And that'll be Bowser.
Fucking Mr. Bowsy. I mean, we can just carry on through the more meat is usually better, but not always better, because once we kind of start getting into it, we can...
I don't think you can say it's a negative. Actually, there's one situation you can say it's a negative, I think, and that I'm going to wait to bring that up.
You're going to save it?
It's not really...
Yeah,
I think it's more relevant later after we've covered all the things because it makes way more sense.
Stay tuned.
If you want to do the too long didn't read, being bigger and more muscular will most likely help. But I think the easiest place to go from here is just talking generally how not all hypertrophy is the same and how generally more muscle can kind of be different depending on how you acquire it. Because I think a lot of people will just feel, hypertrophy. Hypertrophy equals increase in girth. Girth equals good in almost every facet of life. But it's not necessarily the case. And if we're breaking down, what first are the building blocks of hypertrophy? That dog is just going ham.
Fucking hell, please. Oh my God.
I'm just going to
Sorry to interrupt it, sir.
Fuck me.
Usually he sleeps during these and he's just decided that this is ultimate playtime, the best time.
For those who are just listening, Bowser is traversing from the leftmost couch onto Will to try and steal, and then Alex just made a sex noise because he bit him somewhere.
Bit my hand, yeah.
Fucking hell. Righty, we'll rope her back in and go through what's actually going to help build hypertrophy and what are the factors that are going to kind of contribute to it happening, and then we can break down, what does that mean in terms of non-specific and specific and all the other bits and pieces. So when we're talking about hypertrophy, there's a couple of ways for us to achieve it. The creme de la creme of ways to build muscle is mechanical tension. You put more mechanical tension on the tissue tissue generally adapts in some sort of way. Moving down the list, which they get a little bit more squirrely as you keep going down, is general muscle damage and muscle disruption. The literature's a little bit fucking weird on it. Yes, it can help and it does do good things, but you can unequivocally say if you just tear the shit out of it and beat it till it's a fucking bloody pulp, it's probably not going to grow super well. And then you have metabolic stress, like accumulating all the metabolites and stuff in the blood, which helps do all this random shit to then produce more tissue.
So if you give more like practical examples of each of those, like what...
Yeah, so
kind of. I know that it's not like exactly like this is that and that's that, but like I know that they're all related and cross over to some degree. But
yeah, so if you're looking at like accumulating metabolites, think stupidly high volume sets with very little rest time and very isolated contexts.
Burny stuff.
You're just doing like a try drop set leg extension with not a lot of weight and just making that thick pappy thick. With muscular damage, I mean, what's a good example of that? Just fucking it up. Just doing the thing.
I think there's not a particular method. I think they're all going to tick that
They're all
box
gonna
to some
do it.
degree, depending on how you go about it, how much you do. And, it's going to be there. Yeah. It's just knowing that it's there and knowing that it's a part of it.
Yeah, mechanical tension is just going to be the time under tension and... Well, the time and then multiplied by load, or whatever the fuck the equation ends up being. Time and load.
Yeah, the load, I think, was the practical bit that I was trying to get at, is in like just getting stronger over time and putting more load across and training with heavier weight is kind of that part of the equation. It's not one for one. It's not like, hey, that is that, but it's
yeah. Generally, if you're trying to increase mechanical tension, the easiest way to do that is add more weight. So you're looking at still relatively high sets, but, getting your heavy boys in there, and then the other two contribute, but not as much as mechanical tension overall.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do both. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because, you've got people on the internet that will say, if you want to get massive, do sets of 30 on a leg curl and just, to absolute failure, and then get somebody to come up and do forced reps, and they get, get it and then do fucking drop set after that, and just until you literally just can't fucking walk anymore, which is correct. And then you've also got your other side of the people, which are like, nah, man, like 5x5 squats. Trust me, I got big legs. That works, and it absolutely does as well. So that's why it's slightly confusing, is because like I said, they all cross over to some degree. They all might be getting the job done in a slightly different way, in a slightly different mechanism, but it's like I can get big legs in multiple ways, and that's where like if that's all that matters to you, you can do kind of like whatever your preference is. Fuck, squat heavy, or do really high rep leg extensions, or do both. But one isn't. It's just gone. Well, but one isn't the answer. You don't have to do just one or the other type thing.
I'm pretty impressed you're holding together like trains of thought with that dog doing what he's doing.
Just
I'd be
jumping
gone.
on me.
Well, I guess with that being said, so we have the different ways that we can produce a greater size in the tissue. Did you want to go what ways the tissue gets bigger first, or go through a bit more like, do we need directed hypertrophy? I want to go through Actually, I'll answer my own question. Let's talk about how the muscle gets bigger. Get fucked.
Co-host becomes host.
Yes. Nah, I've got Bowser's giving me the reins today. So, I mean, when we're looking at the responses that the tissue can have once you have begun to build in those progression methods and whatever you have a couple of main ways that the tissue does increase in size, and this is something that I was quite interested to learn. You can have the sarcomeres, or the individual units of the muscle. If you don't know what they are, I probably won't explain them very well, but look up what a fucking sarcomere is if you don't know. They're the individual units of the tissue. They can either grow in series or in parallel, which I didn't actually know they could grow in series, which is kind of fucking cool.
Yeah.
But you're looking, essentially, you can either add more subunits parallel, or they get longer and spindlier and thicker. And each of those additions can either be better suited to higher strength output or higher like rate of force development. So the longer ones, like your springy boys, your thick chody ones are kind of like your strong boys, just like the people look like in real life. But when we are building those things,
it's true though. Like you go and you see
a
a powerlifter and who's like jacked, like a jacked powerlifter, and then you see a jacked bodybuilder, and they do look like slightly different. Especially when like you add drugs to that equation. You got like Mr. Olympia, fucking cloud man, and then you've got like lean. I was about to say like elite powerlifter, but like leaner ones to actually see the muscle density, and then like they don't definitely not as like round and fluffy. They're just like they're more dense, I guess is the word. So like the hypertrophy can occur in multiple different ways, and the question we're trying to answer is like, is one better for squatting or is one better for benching or deadlifting?
Probably.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, like if you're looking at the way that you can add them in parallel in series, or as you said, the general size, when you are accruing more mass in a tissue, you can either do it by having more individual subunits being added to the tissue, which would be myofibril hypertrophy, or sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, where you're just adding more juice to the shit that the things swim in. Would that be an adequate depiction of that? You have the intracellular fluid. Yeah,
it's enough for this. We absolutely don't need to go into like full science definitions and
we'll give it a little bit. It's like
get to school.
You've got like the juice. Okay, here we go. Your muscles are a jar of pickles, but just imagine that all the pickles sit parallel and perfect like pickle soldiers. The pickles are the contractile units. The pickle juice is the sarcoplasmic fluid. In the pickle juice, with little like bits of dill and the fucking little white balls and all they are. They're like your mitochondria and your ribosomes and all that shit, which helps produce the energy. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy increases the volume of your pickle juice. Myofibril hypertrophy increases the amount of pickles. The jar of more pickles outputs more pickles, therefore outputs more force. The jar of more juice provides a more hospitable
I would love to have an
pickles.
exercise science type fucking physiologist on right now, or biologist or something. It's just like, just absolutely cringing at every word.
Somewhere
I reckon.
Dr.
Tell
Mike
me
Israel
one
is
thing.
shaking his head.
Tell me one thing wrong with
Were you
that.
about to say?
Tell me one thing that isn't one for one.
You're right. I think if I go to
based.
uni and learn from them, and I open up my textbook, that's probably what I'm going to see. Just a jar of pickles on the page. It's probably yeah. I think you're right.
Some kid in uni is going to be like, "Oh fuck, what? That's what it means."
I get it.
I understand.
So this all comes back to the question of like, I guess the question why this even fucking matters in the slightest to people, in terms of like practical takeaways for people is, again, that question that I initially said was, does it matter for me to get big quads if I sit on a leg extension for all of my quad work, or should I do some squats for my quad work if my end goal is to get better at squats. I mean, it seems pretty fucking obvious when you say it like that, but you know, if we went with that initial line of bigger muscle equals stronger muscle or whatever, like it might not be as obvious to people. So these types of, like, I guess, clarifications of how muscles can grow in different ways potentially leads us to a potential answer to that question. So that's where we're going with this, and we'll keep circling back to that and the practical applications of, like, how, you know, maybe how you should change your training around it eventually. What are some other ways? Give us some other ways that muscles can grow in different ways.
In terms of, like, so the other ways that you can end up producing either more size or just general differences within the tissue, because whatever response you're producing is local, it's not like if you only do shortened range exercises, you get growth in every single part of the tissue. It's kind of like you stimulate this part. Yes, there's some sort of a response that happens globally, but if you train your fuck out of your biceps, surely something happens in your triceps, but your triceps don't grow to the same rate that the biceps grow. So that's another thing we can start talking about. More specific forms of hypertrophy is growing the tissues which are going to contribute more to the lift you're trying to achieve. And to draw back to the description Will kept saying between the squats and the leg extensions, a squat's going to grow different amounts of tissue in different places to a leg extension. Fucking Bowser's going for the exploring. So when you're looking at how these bits and pieces come together, in exercises that are going to stimulate more of the lengthened range, you're probably going to get more growth and more general girth at the more distal ends.
The answer, just like everything, is maybe or potentially.
Yeah.
Like, as in, like, if the question here is, like, if I do, again, leg extensions versus a low bar squat, and, you know, we've got multiple kind of muscles within our quads, and we've got they kind of do slightly different jobs, mostly the same jobs, but slightly different ways. They touch in different spots and stuff. Or we and also within them, obviously, individual, like, muscle fibers and stuff like that. Even though they're both like a quote unquote quad exercise, is one going to grow, you know, my quad that's near my knee, or my quad that's up at my hip, or my quad that's more to the outside or the inside? Like, is there going to be a very small difference in how that tissue is laid down, and does it matter for our primary goal of squatting? I guess, again, the answer is maybe. It
depends.
And the thing is, like, we're nitpicking and saying, like, we're putting in a world where we had to choose. But I mean, like, ideally you're going to do both of them. I mean, that's the real obvious answer. But in reality, you get to do them both. But we're going to give you some practical advice about how you can do them both over time in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, because like we said, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, you don't have a program, and when your coach is writing it, someone's not standing at their head with a gun saying, okay, mate, you can fucking pick shortened or lengthened. You got to do one. That's all you get. You have the ability to,
and it's not just shorten or lengthen.
Yeah, there's
it's
a whole bunch of other
short
shit.
at, you know, different ends and lengthen at different ends and lots of different stuff. But to quickly go off topic and rant a little bit on that, like, a while ago, there was the study that came out and said, like, you know, lengthen slightly better, which it kind of makes sense when you think about it in a practical sense, but they used, I think, in that study, like, leg curls, so like a lying versus seated leg curl, which changes your flexion at the hip, which changes, like, the muscle lengthened or shortened type thing, and the consensus was that the lengthened, so the seated leg curl would be slightly better for hypertrophy. But I mean, I always think with this stuff in that, like, I've never met a guy that brings that up in conversation is never a guy with giant hamstrings. Like, the people with the biggest hamstrings I know would be like, I don't know, I don't know, I just do both. I just hit both of them, and they usually have, like, really strong hinges and stuff as well. You know what I mean? So, like, it's very rarely a one or the other, or you don't have to choose. But, like, it just annoys me when people are like, oh, length, man, like, you have to do this. And I'm like, oh, come on, man, does it really fucking matter? Type thing, you know?
They're always small. And as well, like, if you're looking at maximizing things, if you're sitting there and if you have your laying hamstring curl and your seated hamstring curl side by side, and you make that choice purely based off the, I don't know, plus 1% hypertrophy, and even though you may prefer how the laying one feels, they're like, oh, this one feels great, but the science says I need to do the seated one. Some of these people can't even fucking get to bed on time. If you can't get to bed on time, it doesn't fucking matter which seated
there's so many
hamstring
things
curl
to worry
you do.
about before it.
Yeah, there's certain optimizations that don't necessarily need to happen.
Yeah. But that just annoys me sometimes when I hear that, and then like it's always like a dude who RDLs like 100 kilos who's like, no, seated leg curls are better for your hamstrings. It's like, bro, come on, man, like Jesus. But anyway, let's go back. Another one that people often bring up in this type of discussion around like can a muscle's strength or output and different ways of it occurring would be muscle fiber types. So you hear people like type 1, type 2, then you get the picture of the sprinter who's like fucking fast twitch, and then the slow twitch person, and the whatever person, and then the discussions and arguments that come with that. But in your mind, again, do we really give a fuck about it as powerlifters and how we train? Like if I'm trying to get my quad bigger, do I care about doing more like explosive shit or like less explosive shit? Like, or do I just care that it's, you know, the fucking legs are growing in general?
Look, I think that when you're looking at, if someone's going in and saying, cool, I need to maximize my type 2 muscle fibers, and what's the word for them? Myosin heavy chain isoform. That's kind of like the differentiation between which fiber type. I just don't think it matters in the least. Like if you're a powerlifter, chances are you're going to have a fuckload of type 2, and you're going to be suited to what you do. And that's really the most simple explanation of how these fiber types work. The tissue changes based on the demand that it's placed on. If all you do is heavy fucking squats, your muscle's going to do whatever it needs to do to be good at heavy fucking squats. And yes, there is research that they can change and alter over time, and that these fiber types can shift, and it happens over the course of, say, a more voluminous block where loads are lighter and there's more general fatigue. They might shift a little bit more to the spectrum of type 1. And it's also something that my university lecturers fucked up when they taught me. I was under the impression there was like, this one's a 1 and this one's a 2, and 2s can't be 1s and 1s can't be 2. It's kind of like all muscle is muscle, and they're all graded just like slightly
That's
fucking
definitely
differently.
what I used to thought too,
Yeah, it's like, it's not like there's blue ones and there's red ones. It's like they're all like this fucked up mix of colors, and they all do certain jobs in certain ways. And they can shift, but chances are you don't have to think about it. And if you are, don't. You just
It's just another thing that I think like it comes in this conversation of like, if we do this exercise or that exercise, do we adapt in different ways? But it's again, it's a maybe, a potential. It's a thing maybe you don't have to worry about. But so far you've mentioned the myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic, different adaptions from different types of training potentially.
The pickle jar.
We talked about like potentially growing like certain fibers or in certain areas of a muscle, or you know, if we're talking quads, like in the muscle group, like certain ones getting biased slightly from different movements. And now that as well, the fiber type discussion. I don't know if you've got any more kind of differences that could potentially arise from different styles of hypertrophy training, but I guess the answer is that if exactly kind of what you just said a second ago is that like you're going to get good at the thing that you train for. As in, like, if you want to get good at heavy squats, probably the best way to grow quads in a way that's going to carry over to heavy squats would likely be to do heavy squats and things that look like heavy squats or are very, very similar, specific to heavy squats, Like, I don't think we can make the argument that the leg extension will definitely not carry over to your squat, but you're absolutely not going to do some leg extensions today and then your squat's going to go up tomorrow or even next week or even next month type thing. It doesn't work like that. But so with all that in mind, like at Nexus gyms, at both the Nexus gyms now, we have a wide variety of machines, best machines on the market, might I add. All stuff that I personally love and chose. And so should we just throw them all in the bin and then just go, no, everybody, specificity is what matters. Just do squats, for your gains.
Look, as I unroll my prayer mat and
are you
take
saying
out
that?
my Mike Teixeira cutout and I place it due north, I do agree that is the thing you need to do. Now, I think that as with most things when it comes to training, it comes down to periodization. And yes, specificity is always going to be the fucking king of the castle. Like, you look at me, king of the castle, I have a chair. It's going to be the thing that makes the result that you want. But within a periodized plan, there is always time to use the high quality equipment. You can find it all Nexus Performance gyms. Please come to our open day, even though the open day is probably done now.
It would be well and truly done.
It's already done. But
if you've got a time machine, go back in time.
Yeah.
And it's good to note that even though, yes, these different forms of hypertrophy may be better suited for different outcomes, some can be used really well in a preparatory sense for the following phase. So things within sarcoplasmic hypertrophy saying, okay, yes, this may not directly improve the amount of contractile units, but one, it can do a great job of increasing work capacity. It can help you produce and provide more nutrients and more energy to the tissue. So using sarcoplasmic hypertrophy as a primer for then more myofibril work can be useful. But again, that's also just very heavily overcomplicating it. From a very basic sense, you can use these hypertrophy-based machines and drive more generalized hypertrophy further away from a comp. And as every fucking program to ever exist, as you get closer to the comp, the needle pointens. The needle pointens? The point of the needle sharpens.
He's on point with these analogies today.
Making up words.
I think, like, if we had the most, like, specific ideal program for powerlifting ever and we relied on that for all of our strength and hypertrophy gains and develop us as the best athlete possible, if we just, like, it absolutely is not this simple in the real world, but, like, if we just said we need 15 sets of, like, quad dominant movement per week for our squat to go up and for our quads to get bigger and stuff like that, and we decided, well, you know what, to get those 15 sets of quad stimulating movements in, I'm going to do that in the most specific way possible. So I'm going to do either singles, or even if we take a couple of steps back, so I'm going to do like triples for 15 sets of triples over the week at a relatively like hard intensity, because we need it to be like fairly intense to grow muscle. We know this. Like straight off the bat, that sounds fucking like awesome. Just ridiculous. Oh. Just like absolutely like I don't know how many weeks you're going to last on that program, but it's probably not going to do a whole lot, especially when you start ticking the bench box and the deadlift box and that as well. So like, even though in theory that might be the most like ideal specific way to grow muscle in a way that's going to definitely contribute towards your SBD strength, it just, as well as the things you said, it just practically doesn't fucking make sense either. Like, it just, like, mentally, it'd be boring as shit. Your joints and all that would get beat up, and there'd be a lot of fatigue coming off it. Like, your sessions would literally just be SBD, and it would just be, I just can't find any, I don't think there's a person I've ever met that could just do that for years on end, and personally, I don't think it'd be the best program anyway. I'm not saying that, but even if it was, I just don't know if I can find anybody that could stick to that and put in that amount of effort for that a long time. Like, so that's where, as you said, the word periodization and specificity being on, the way we've described it before, is like specificity being on like a sliding like a continuum over time with your program periodization makes a whole lot of sense. So if we start near comp as our most specific training time, we're trying to get really good at 1RMs, you should probably do like singles at relatively close to, maybe RP 6, 7, 8, maybe some 9s here and there, whatever, like something fairly close to that to be stimulatory and get us good at the thing. And then if we step back a little bit further from that, and when hypertrophy is a little bit more of a concern, not to say it isn't a concern, that is still be working, but we're more focused on maintenance and skill development in that last stage. But if we go back a little bit further to when hypertrophy is concerned, now maybe we go like, okay, we're going to get most of our hypertrophy through still very specific movements because we're still relatively close to comp. So maybe we're going to do like 5x5 squats, and that's going to be our like quaddy stuff. And then maybe we supplement that, back that up. If somebody can't show competence through that amount of work, and it kind of we find it fucks them up a little bit too much to use scientific terms. We might supplement that with like some safety bar or some belt squat or some, something as similar as we can to get the most transference to the lift whilst still ticking the boxes, but not being exactly the same thing. And then if we go back a step further, now we might go, actually, we don't need any comp movements for right now, other than like in our previous few episodes ago, we talked about minimum effective dose. Maybe we just keep it at minimum effective dose. And we just go like, all right, now we're just for the bulk of our work, now we're going to do belt squats and pendulum squats and hack squats and whatever it is squats. So things that are still quite similar. And then go back to like 30 weeks out or something like crazy. Maybe doing like a huge off season or some shit. Now, all right, fuck it. Let's get a ton of work in through leg extensions, because it's going to get our quads bigger, but as we've stated, maybe in a slightly less specific way, maybe in a way that slightly won't carry out our squats too much, but there's still benefits to it. So like, let's do it then to get the training effect. It's going to have way less fatigue, so we can probably do more of other stuff as well. There are the little benefits like that to it. So now and then hopefully each one of those, like you said, carries into each other and carries us forward in a way. So that's how we're going to lay it out. And it's periodization is not there, I don't feel, because it's like 100% needed. Like if I could just do really specific work year round and just continually just fucking just hit those really hard specific phases, maybe I would, like if I wanted to there'd be an absolute really good argument for that if I wanted to be the best powerlifter I could be. But it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't make sense. It just practically in the real world just is very fucking hard to do that. So for all those reasons I just stated, so.
Although there is people who can do it, and Lord behold,
absolutely,
they're just really fucking good at the sport. Like there's some things
have
that
a lot of genetics behind them as well, usually.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And to kind of carry with that train of thought within the realm of periodization, it's not like saying when you're 3 or 4 weeks out that you're consciously saying, cool, within this I'm ticking the demands of hypertrophy. Like I'm not thinking two fucks about hypertrophy when someone's 5 weeks out. But within all hypertrophy work, there's some sort of strength element. Within all strength work, there's some kind of stimulus that produces more tissue, be it in terms of density or size. Yeah. Like
even if there's less stimulus, it's enough.
It's always happening.
All our goal is just not to get smaller during those final phases.
And like we've said before with the minimum dosage stuff, like doing heavy squats is enough stimulus to not get smaller. And that's kind of something that you're looking at instead of thinking about it as hypertrophy. It's just general tissue maintenance and thinking, okay, these things keep my muscles big, goods. Now focus on strong. That's the sentence.
You can put way more focus on the skill, because like your goal is maintenance, and maintenance for hypertrophy is very easy.
Yeah.
Right? But you're probably not going to get jacked as fuck from it. So like it's again a periodization thing and a long-term like longevity view of it.
It's a sliding scale. If I want to jump back somewhere as well, because we're fucking all over the shop today. When you mentioned in an ideal world,
this is on point. Last week was all over the shop.
You'd get all your hypertrophy from heavy singles. Yes, that is the case, but to mesh in what I said earlier in those kind of major mechanisms which produce hypertrophy, being the mechanical tension, the muscular damage, and the metabolic stress, there's kind of like this weird soup that happens with, okay, if the load's heavy enough, then you're not producing a lot of metabolites. If you're producing a lot of metabolites, the load's probably not super heavy. If it's super heavy and super high volume, you probably fucked the shit out of the tissue. Now it's just some flaccid mess on the floor. So to produce these elements of hypertrophy, it's kind of like a mix of all of them. If the load's super high, there's probably not a lot of volume, which means, okay, that's got to be fairly close to failure. If there's a metric arse load of volume, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of metabolic stress. You're probably going to be fine with the load being a bit lower because there's stimulus coming from both ends. You're kind of being spit roasted by these variables in a very real sense.
Yeah, I love your descriptors there, like arse load. I think that's a really good metric they use in the science. I see that one a bit too.
Isn't a butt load like a cask of wine? Like there's a certain measurement that has a butt load. Can you say something and I'll look this up?
Okay, yeah, you can.
Make good use of your time.
Well, the one that I was going to quickly touch on is PEDs and drugs, because obviously like PEDs have a little bit of a, I don't want to go deep into it because it's just, it's a whole other discussion, but like they help us grow tissue. Like they help us with everything performance, but one of the main benefits we get out of them would be hypertrophy. It's just much easier to grow tissue, and you need just like if we're talking about this range of stimulus, and this is slightly more stimulating than that, and that one's like a little bit less, won't get the same result. Like you throw drugs in the mix, now everything works. You know what I mean? So it just lets the stimulus kind of be way more open, and you're going to respond a lot easier to shit. So how that applies into your training and how you structure things, it's up to you. But there are many different ways. You don't have to change anything. You can just train the way you would if you were completely natural, and that will work fine. I don't think there's any special considerations, but just know you probably get away with a little bit more. You'll probably be a little bit more specific and get a better stimulus from it in terms of growth. You'll probably still grow really well on a quite specific training block. You don't need to probably do like hypertrophy blocks as much, because you're just going to grow fucking pretty well from fuck all. But like there's other considerations to it as well. Like now you're going to be probably progressing your strength at a higher rate, and there's going to be limitations on that. There are multiple considerations in the practical sense of how we go about it. But again, my advice would be like don't let it be like a determining factor in how you train. Like just train like you would without, and just maybe you progress a little bit faster. Awesome, but just like I said, you can get away with a little bit more, and that's kind of where drugs come into this whole equation. You don't have to think as hard. You just it's a little bit, just let you be a little shitter.
You just put them in and let you do the thing.
Yeah, you just like add drugs, do kind of half decent training, probably grow. Whereas like natural advanced lifter is like, I do everything perfect, do all my little 1%ers that Zach talked about earlier that probably weren't relevant, and I still don't gain as much.
I still suck. And then now, after you just said that, there's a bunch of kids like pulling down the top of their pants, trying to find the top of their glute.
No. There are definite negatives as well. There's never just a purely pros column to anything. Everything comes with cons. There's always the cost. And drugs, PEDs, certainly absolutely fucking have that. But that's, again, a topic for another time.
If I want to completely change the tone. So a buttload is 126 gallons of wine. Generally, there's 60 gallons of wine to like a barrel. So 2 barrels of wine is a buttload, which is 504 bottles of wine.
Okay.
That is a buttload.
Is a buttload of wine. Just so we know.
So when you say it now, you can
picture 504 bottles of wine.
You use it in its correct way. So whenever we're having a conversation and somebody's like, man, that's a buttload of reps you're doing, I'll be like, well, actually, no, that's the term that would be used in wine. But you're incorrect in your usage of that statement there, my friend.
That's why I was wondering when he said it, is like, if you're saying it's a buttload of wine, is that like saying ATM machine? You're saying machine twice? You don't need to say it's of wine because it's a buttload.
It's just for wine.
It implies wine.
So if you ever
these are the tough ones.
It would make the conversation confusing though if you're just like, hey buttload. Mate, can you just go get us a buttload? You're like, of what? What are you talking about?
That's language Jack can't use when he's water cutting.
We need. Fuck! I can't wait to have Jack on. I know we haven't had Jack's intro podcast, but that's absolutely coming up.
It's because his internet runs off a Mango.
He does. Yeah, he's trying to connect to the satellite via Mango from his fishing boat.
Not the best podcast connection.
So where do we? Are we pretty happy with that? Like looking at my notes, I think we've covered everything and more. Yeah, I think we've essentially said like there are different ways that a muscle can get bigger. It does matter to some degree, but if you periodize in a correct way, you can kind of do everything over that period if you do it smart. By starting it less specific, as in like higher reps, lower loads, closer to failure, less specific movements, and then as you get closer to comp, you're going to more specific movements, you're going to higher loads, you're going to more skill-based sort of stuff, if we want to term it like that. And through that whole process, you should have ticked all of your boxes. So at the end of all this, it doesn't fucking matter if you do that.
I think that's a nice wrap up. I like that.
I think a nice way to summarize it is that for hypertrophy, it's not just the size. Like, bigger is not better. It's how you use it, right?
We'll go with that. We'll kick there.
It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the dog in the fight.
But I forgot to go back to the thing that I was going to mention. The one scenario where being bigger might not be better is when you're in the edge weight classes. So if you're if you're competing in the 100 kilo weight class and you already weigh 100 kilos or even slightly over, probably not a great idea to go and absolutely blast a whole lot of biceps or back work, or even like less specific movements like leg extensions and stuff like that in your off season to try and make your muscles bigger, because like we've said, a bigger muscle can be a stronger muscle, but a more specific bigger muscle is a more stronger muscle in our sense. So like you probably should at that point be focused on the skill stuff, be focused on more specific movements and more specific hypertrophy, I guess. That would be the thing. It's don't go on more muscle, but for the majority of people, probably 99.999% of people out there, getting bigger is only going to help you.
Unless when you're at the top of that 100 kilo weight class, you're kind of chubby and weak, then there's probably some caveats.
I'm saying when you're maximized, like you're absolutely tapped out, like you're a fucking beast.
You didn't say that. You just said if you're at the top of a weight class. It's like
no. I'm picturing world champion, already top of the pile, strong as fuck, big, already maximized tissue in weight class. Yeah. Like just probably should be really quite specific at that point.
Just a stallion.
Generally, the more advanced you are, the less general training in the sense you are doing relative to that goal. And you would say hypertrophy is more of a general goal when it comes to powerlifting, right? Like it's obviously a big part of it, but it's not the goal.
Yeah. It's like I said, there are instances, in theory, exactly perfect. But in the real world, where doing SBD every single fucking day isn't fun, there are other reasons why you could add that shit in. But anyway, I'm happy to leave it there. I think we're good. I think we've ticked all the boxes. If anybody has any more questions or queries about getting fucking huge and strong, hit us up. Go to our website, NexusPerformance.Aus, and inquire about online coaching. Or if you're in the Gold Coast and Townsville, head to the gyms and you can use not only all the specialized powerlifting equipment for your specific gains, but you can use all the best machines for your non-specific hypertrophy as well.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Red hot. Thank you for listening to Nexus Unloaded. Be sure to jump on our website to find details on everything mentioned on today's podcast, plus information on our coaching, mentoring, and gym services. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at NexusPerformance.Aus for any updates on what we are currently doing. See you all in the next episode.